Hello and welcome to Particular, a podcast where we delve into the minds of some of the most creative and innovative leaders in the industry. In this series of episodes, we will be exploring the creative process of the individuals and gaining insight into how their minds work when it comes to bringing new ideas to life. Today's guest is Rasmus Smith Bech, the Executive Creative Director at BBC Creative. We discuss how AI is changing our creativity and inspiring us to create more unique and interesting content. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of creativity like never before. So, Rasmus, thank you so much for coming to my podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and I'm really impressed by what you do. I've been following you on LinkedIn, and maybe you can do like a quick introduction of what you do now and where you work, and we can start from there.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, thank you for the invitation. It will be fun to chat to you. My name is Rasmus Smith Bech, and I'm currently ECD at BBC Creative, which is BBC's in-house agency, you might call it. Behind my fancy title just means that I oversee a lot of the creative work going out and help set the agenda of kind of the tone and what we're trying to achieve with the work and trying to steer the work the best way possible. And before that, I've worked for more than a decade in London, and before that, I was in Amsterdam, and then all the way back, I studied in Denmark, where I was born and raised in Copenhagen. So yeah, that's where you can hear my accent from. So yeah, that's me in 60 seconds.
That's a great introduction. Also, wanted to ask you, can you tell about your recent projects? Like, what are you the most like? What are you most proud of? Like in working in BBC, and I've seen one of your latest one was like this BBC. We are BBC, or is it correct the name of the project? The one that won Webby.
Oh, it might have it's probably the our latest news
Yeah.
project, which was uh, it was called Trust is Earned, and it was the whole project was about it's an interesting time in history, isn't it, with social media and with all the amazing things that the internet opens up for, also comes some slightly worrying things to some extent sometimes, and anyone can post anything on the internet. And we thought it was really important to remind everyone of that whatever news they consume, remember to be critical of like how it was made or why it was made or who made it and what kind of agenda they were following in the background. And obviously, this is from we were making this point from the BBC, which is aiming to be impartial always and trying to show things from multiple sides and have very rigid um, guidelines that the journalist follows. And that's what we brought to life throughout this film, which also showed some of the coverage on the ground in Ukraine and partly in Russia. So it was emphasizing that and showing what the BBC does and the extents they try to go to try and deliver as impartial news as possible, which is was obviously a very important cause, and very excited to be a part of that project and yeah, delivering that message and reminding everyone, and especially both, of course, reminding people on telly, but also on the internet. So while you're consuming all these news from all sorts of weird areas of the internet where you don't really know where it comes from, you might not even yeah, it's not a regulated news source or anything. Then it was really interesting to put in that context as well and see it on Twitter and so on. So yeah, that was all obviously. So I'm glad you pulled that one out because that is one of the projects I'm super excited about, and it's also one of the things, the reason why I joined the BBC, which is I believe in a lot of the the things that BBC stands for and the mission behind a lot of it. There's a lot of chat about purpose in advertising, as in trying to do good in the world, which is fantastic, and I really believe in it. But like any other things, there's it could be taken advantage of, as in trying to greenwash or sports wash or whatever you see happening out there. But BBC is just really like, what I find so interesting about that brand is like at the heart of it, most of the things the BBC offers has a true purpose, and actually is a public service, which is in the literal sense trying to help the public to some extent. And I think that's really interesting. So that goes across the news, like try and help you make up your mind yourself, rather than being forced upon an opinion. And like, it's all the way to the kids stuff that BBC does, like that is shows that are literally created together with a marine biologist so it's you learn something at the same time while you're being entertained. And it's like bite size, which is used in schools around the UK, which is like an education tool to support teachers. And so there's just so many sides of the BBC, which I'm very excited to help support, because I believe in those things and the importance of them. And so yeah, and one of them was BBC News, which was fun. But we do. This was also your question about like recent projects, but it's not like it always needs to be. Obviously, news is quite serious.
Yeah.
But we do all sorts of different projects, all the way to I just mentioned Bite Size, which is like that tool which helps kids revise and so on, which is actually along the lines of fighting the same fight as BBC News about going up against misinformation and so on.
Sure.
But it's happening also across TikTok, anywhere else where especially the kids are, and they are starting to write their school papers like with ChatGPT. They are getting their sources are Wikipedia that can literally be like edited by anyone and so on. So we again, like, to promote this bite size, we just reminded the kids on TikTok and so on, in hopefully an entertaining way, hopefully quite surprising, that like don't get your news from anyone. So it was we started making these where you think you're getting one of the classic videos where people are trying to teach you something, or I know something about something. And we did all the way from unicorn anatomy, where obviously doesn't exist, and going in and try to block that. Anyway, it's always a bit hard to explain an advert with words, but it's better in real life. Watch it. But that was another project which I thought was really lovely, entirely different shape, which was like only 15 seconds long, because it needs to fit with that attention span, media space.
Yeah.
But all sorts of other projects which I'm really proud of. For the BBC, we did to celebrate the 100-year anniversary. Like, rather than just giving, it's easy to celebrate yourself. Look at all these amazing things we've done throughout the years, and like the impact we've had, and like look at all these famous faces. We flipped it on its head and thought like, oh, maybe we should celebrate all the wonderful people that tune in every day and watch our shows and listen to the radio shows and so on. And a way of celebrating, we gave them a chance to become extras in the background in their favorite show. So it became a really fun competition, which was really tricky to make, but rewarding when you saw their faces and seeing them in the background of their own shows. And it was really wonderful, fun project. And I don't know how loads, but an interesting one, considering the title of the podcast might be worth mentioning. We did a project called The Capture, and it was to promote a TV show, the second season the capture, which is really interesting. It's about the like photo manipulation, but also like video manipulation and all these it's obviously a drama, so it's all fictional, but like playing with topics that are actually relevant and really interesting. And we did this thing where we basically hijacked our whole trailer junction. So you thought you were sitting watching normal trailers, as you do in between the shows. It runs like Planet Earth, and we had like a cooking show and like um, a dancing show, and then you kind of like you thought you were watching those trailers, but we almost hijacked them like they were being hacked from somewhere else and inserted the other program we were promoting into it. So
Is
we
it
were
the one with
basically
EastEnders? Yeah, where
no,
the
sorry, that's something different. I can explain that
yeah.
afterwards as well. But like yeah, but we basically, the topic which the show was about, which was all about hacking and
Hmm.
photo manipulation, we did it to ourselves and hacked all of our own trailers for other shows, which was really interesting. But we also worked with voice cloning and gave it to some of our radio hosts that they could literally borrow each other's voices, and like putting it out there literally how scary to some extent it is that you can borrow someone else's voice, but also uh, how it's not that easy, but it will probably be very easy in the future. So just something to be awareness. So like to create awareness about the show, but also the topic and so on. But it was really interesting. So yeah, that was just a bit more related to AI and where we're going with technology and so on going forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned the importance of purpose. So
Mm,
from what I see, like in the industry, people have this opinion of advertising as just working for the client. So basically, just making the client more, helping with brand awareness, getting more followers, getting more clients, but not about the purpose. So, do you think is it a new trend as like being purposeful, or has it always been like that, but just the clients and the companies were not allowing creatives to walk in that direction?
yeah, it's a very good question, and I think probably all the biggest and best brands have probably always had a purpose and uh, or something they believe in, or like a direction they're walking in, or something. Because that is what you're saying. Everybody wants to sell more products or get people to do something or engage with their brand. It's more how you get there, right? And from my point of view, uh, I I try not to just make advertising. I try to m- make brands say and do interesting things. And I know it sounds like just a confused way of saying the same thing, but I think there's a slight shift in how you think about it. Rather than sitting down and starting with a 30-second advert that can tell you that we got this new product, it's about looking at the context of the product and what part, like even stepping away from that product and looking at us as a brand, like how can we play the most important part of in people's lives, right? An important role in it, rather than just hard selling. And I think that's probably finding the purpose of your brand, like rather than something that's what I'm talking about, and I'm not thinking about anything specific, but like a lot of brands, for a very short amount of time, attach them to like a purpose in
Yeah,
quotation marks. That you see, it becomes Pride season, and all the logos turns into like rainbow flags and so on.
yeah,
But is there any substance behind it? Because then it flicks back, and then of course one side of me is just like, yes, it's great that brands jump aboard, and like it's very sweet, and the more awareness, the better. But you do wish for a little bit more commitment and like go beyond it. If you really believe in like people can be whoever they want and like all that stuff, then do it throughout like everything you stand for. That all goes all the way down to how you treat your employees within the company. So I think that's way more interesting when you find a true brand purpose of your brand, like I don't know, top of my mind is like also Nike, right? Like that has that core belief. If you got a body, you can be an athlete, and that's a beautiful mission, right? And I don't know if that is a purpose, but it feels like it to me. Like it's something they believe in and something they always want to push, right? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your
Did you?
question, but
Yeah. It totally does. And I'm interested. Like, did you ever have any challenges in trying to persuade the client that you like working with to? So they just want to have a regular advertising to sell their product, and you want to showcase their purpose. You want them to help find their purpose. Like, did you ever have this kind of challenge trying to persuade them so that the purpose is the most important thing, not just selling your product?
yeah, of course, like it's never easy, and it's also I don't often it's not either or either, if that makes sense, as in
Yeah.
you sometimes have to do both, right? Like because quite often there's also an element that plays into it. The more brand led you do, the more like mission of your brand you talk and communicate. That is usually it's a longer term investment in trying to get people to love you, and it might take a little bit more time, maybe, but it's probably also more long term love you create in that sense. Where sometimes, depending on what brand you are, sometimes you also need to know that it's available tomorrow. Like, oh, this is what it costs, and so on, and Nike, if we stay with that, like rather than just to take an example, they are in quite a lucky position that it feels like they are doing all the big brand work, like a lot of it, and then they have, because it's such a popular brand, they almost have like all the other retail stores like doing the hard working stuff for them, that tells you the price, because that is what attracts some people, and on some really basic level at some point as well. Like if it is half price, I might buy it. Do you know what I mean? But they get other people to do that bit. So yeah, it's I think it's being aware that you can work on different levels at all the time, and you probably have to, no matter what. But back to your point, it's really important. The most important is also to know and stand for something as a brand, I think, going forward and into the future, and especially when we live in a world where people are trying to avoid advertising, but people love brands, so you just need to do something interesting for a brand, and then they'll listen. Do you know what I mean? Back to an example of the project we did, called 15 Seconds of Fame, which where does that sit on that scale? It is an advert to some extent, like reminding you why the BBC exists. You get to tell like the world about like some of your most famous shows, because you kind of like you offer it up as a prize that you can be in these, like I can remember how many shows or roles you could get, like uh, let's say 10, but then you still promote those TV, like those shows, but it doesn't feel like an advert. It felt like a prize you could win. So
Yeah.
it's like it's something you want to engage with. It was like I want to share it to my friend who is an EastEnders fan. Yeah, because I know they love it. So that is where I think the most interesting opportunities are in where we're going with advertising, and that's why you again could see like people doing ad block or skip advert as a as a negative thing, but you could also see it as a challenge, right? That it's a
Yeah.
challenge to the industry to be more interesting, up your game. You can't just shout in people's face. So you need to be interesting and give them some value, or like and so I choose to look at it that way instead.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I think it's really important to bring emotion like that is connected to your brand. Either it can be very subtle or it can be direct. and any emotion is like, it's priceless. Basically, you can encourage people to feel something and connect emotions, memories, or events to your brand, which is really important. And
Exactly.
in this case, as you mentioned, advertising has to up its game, and all the brands has to up its game. And right now, with the whole AI coming into our industry, a lot of brands think, I don't need an advertising agency anymore. I don't need people to do my advertising. I can just use ChatGPT to write copy and to use Midjourney or whatever tool I want to create visuals. And that's my advertising. So, do you think it is a real threat to the industry, or is it just a way of mediocre and average content to be on the market and for advertising agencies to basically, like, excel in their comparison?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very interesting, isn't it? Like what's going on. And by the way, I just need to put a disclaimer in. I'm no AI expert in any
Yeah,
sense
we're not
whatsoever. So
experts. Yeah.
no, 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 no. So, but I'll gladly give you my two cents. But I think it's a really, again, interesting time. It's like I think it'll be. It feels like the next level of the internet. What the impact the internet had to the world uh, feels like it's in the same area in a slightly different way. And the internet has done amazing stuff for a lot of industries, but of course put a stopper to some other industries. And there's good things coming with the internet, and there's bad stuff coming with it. Like you're connected to everyone around the world. Like the possibilities, you can learn anything with it. Like it's amazing, isn't it? But obviously there's also all the other sides of it, which like the negative impacts of social media and all these other things. So it, it's not only good, it's not only bad. And I think we're in exactly the same place with the AI and machine learning and where we're going with it. At the moment, I think I look at it a little bit like maybe what also another reference would be doctors, right? Like doctors without technology, like hopefully it makes them better. That the amazing brain scans they can do, the robots they can do to do precision surgeries and all that stuff. So it only makes them even more better and more powerful and more precise and all those things. Hopefully we're going in that direction in terms of creativity as well. Like, as in, it will hopefully only open up for even more exciting opportunity and even more creativity and just work faster and cut away all the boring stuff we don't want to make and all those things. And I think at the moment, I think it's also worth remembering, at least where it's at, is that back to the doctor analogy, you need someone to oversee. Like machine learning needs a human input. You need someone to put something into it to just like go through the algorithm and then it can calculate stuff from. It's all stats and rules and like process and learning from what it learned previously. But in my head, it's like creativity is like it's breaking rules. It's doing the unexpected. It's like delivering it in a new, exciting way. And if machine learning is always trying to do a version of something it's learned before, then I guess that's not like the most amazing new creativity that will come out of it. Like if you, yeah. So the short answer to it is I still think you need people behind it to put something into it that will make it truly unique. And then of course you can just, I think where it's at the moment, it's really early days. I don't even think it's that useful, but hopefully it'll just become a tool that can speed up some processes and help us with some of the more basic tasks we almost would rather not do anyway. So and you could also argue like back in the days when you had to do an advertising presentation, like you would have to scamp up work, like draw it, or like where would you get the images from? It was a little bit before my time, but I guess you had to scan from a book, or I don't know, like before Google Images. And like, isn't it just fantastic? We can just Google image and pull it into a presentation, and like you know, it's only made it better, right, and quicker, and way more about. It's just a tool to get to the really exciting stuff, which is making it and so on. And hopefully this will just, the thing I see could be positive as well is like it just opens it up to more people, and there's more accessibility for everyone to get involved with creativity and create stuff. But we still need all the quirky creatives out there to do the thinking behind it, or the human observations, or like insert something fantastic into this machine before it really delivers something exciting, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And like I recently read an article, and basically, like quoting from this article, is that AI is imitating what is already done. So it's basically like aggregating all the average stuff that exists on the internet. But at the same time, I was thinking, when we are creating something, we are also imitating each other. We are imitating the events that happened. We are imitating art that already exists and everything. So basically, how will AI be different to the creative process that we have of imitation in its basis? I understand that creativity requires more than reason, like quoting from this article, but at the same time, um, we're not always like using like just not only reason or like all our ideas. We still have this path. So how will we be able to um, differ from the AI in this case?
No, it's a good point. So like, yeah, you're saying that we are also impacted by all sorts of other things, and like, so no, I agree, and it's a very very good point, an interesting point. I just think it's a very nuanced and very delicate thing, and it's quite hard to, a lot of things I think or feel I almost can't post rationalize, like, because one thing is like being impacted by a trip to the museum, but what about the journey there where you sat next to someone and overheard something uh, mixed with something entirely different? Like, it's just so nuanced and delicate, and it's senses and it smells and it's hearing, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like that. It's just not that delicate at the moment, and human interactions and energies and like self-confidence or self-doubt, and like how can a machine feel, like learn? And so will it always have that superficial level of it? Could you counteract that? Isn't there a version of that on the internet, like everything we write and tweet and images we post and emojis? Isn't that a version of that? I guess you could counter argument to me. But what is maybe interesting in that debate is that, is the internet a version of actually our reality, or is that just because that paints a very certain picture? I think probably people are more perfect on the internet, people are more aggressive on the internet, and I think actually, again, if machines are learning from that, then again it will create these distorted, let's say they're creating like a film, like those kind of films that will be creating might not speak, it might speak to what the internet wants and what they are reflecting, but it might not speak to actually who we are, how we feel, and what is actually reality of how we live. So that might just be a nuance within it, which is quite interesting. I i guess I would just still like to like, the ultimate point is like we're so nuanced, like beings, as in how we take in stuff. So it's just, how can you create a robot that can take in that delicate, nuanced things? And like, who knows? Like, it might be coming, and it might be why, like when recently, probably, what, because I've always been quite, it's I'm not too worried. Like I'm probably positive by nature, but like or naive, some might say. But like as in the worrying bit was when they released that open letter from Elon Musk and loads of other experts that said they should probably pause the development of AI for half a year. But that was the only thing that made me stop and like, oh, which direction is this taking? So yeah, that was one thing that made me like, yeah, slightly worried.
Yeah, and do you think so? Like continuing your thought, the worrying thing about AI for me, maybe it's something else for you, is the bias and all the problems that exist on the internet. This AI is going to learn on this, So there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of sexism, homophobia, xenophobia on the internet. So basically, will AI, when it will produce something creative, will it take this learnings into the account,
Mm.
or is there something else that we should be aware of? Because I understand in the creative process there's a lot of bias. It's the bias from the creative himself or herself, themselves, or like from the client side. But now we will have this third element of the creative tool that maybe someone will use, that will exist in our industry. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I think that's also what I meant a little bit like of if it's a reflection of the internet, is that actually the best version of humanity? So again, that comes back to like most likely we shouldn't let uh, this machine learning run wild no matter what. Coming back to what we were talking about, like as in advertising, would you just let a machine reflect entirely what's going on in the internet without no supervision of like a human being that can kind of like see if it's making really obvious mistakes? Because like you said, like you've seen those experiments where you created like a chatbot that took over a Twitter profile and it turned totally racist because it was learning from what was going on in the internet. But if you take it to philosophy level, there might be a really interesting lesson in it. Like if robots are and AI is learning from everything we do on the internet and how we are towards each other, maybe that's a wake up call as well. Like how we should look at how we behave and how we are towards each other. And it's a good reminder, isn't it? If we are basically raising a child like a robot child, like what do we want to teach it? Do we
Yeah,
want to teach it to be kind to each other, or do you want to teach it all the other horrible stuff that is going on in the internet? So I think your point is valid, and it's definitely something to keep in mind, right? Like and probably why, which is another point around this, is like rules and regulations, right? Which is we probably, it feels like people should start taking that part of it serious, right? Because it's coming, like it or not, and it feels like it's been slow, like regulations in terms of social media. Like we've seen the impact around the world, especially with news and like impacting elections and all sorts of different things. And it feels like it would be great if we were on the front foot of like actually trying to make some rules around this, or like see the problems before they become too big. And probably it needs to probably be from government level for it to be really serious and get 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 it done properly. So yeah, I think that's another part of it which hopefully will be taken care of and is being thought about already.
sure. Yeah, I think I read something like quite yesterday. I think that European Union is releasing rules and regulations concerning AI. So we'll see how that goes. And I wanted to ask you: do you use AI in your creative work right now?
No. In all honesty, I know some of the team does, like, but it's literally in a very practical mainly as a tool for like quick photoshopping. You can type in 2 words and it creates an image for you, and it's quicker to pop in your presentation. But uh, not besides that. We have used it a little bit, like I mentioned briefly, as in terms of a campaign. We used it for creating a tool that some of our presenters could use, like this AI voice cloning tool to raise awareness about it. But like we used it like literally, but that was to raise awareness about that tool. So
Yeah.
and so it was very direct in that sense. In the background, we're not really using it to create like original art or creativity as such. But so it feels like very early days in terms of like practically how we can use it in a professional way. But I've seen like things they're starting to add into like Photoshop and like different kind of like film programs where you can also I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I believe you could literally input a script and it could turn it into like a animatic for you, or like draw up the frames of a storyboard, which again is just a really useful, interesting tool that that could speed up the process in some sense. But again, that might be challenging the job of some people that are storyboard artists. But again, that is where maybe they just need to use their skills in a slightly different way, rather than like there'll always be need for amazing like illustrators and artists, right? Like so it's just taking over like a little part of it, but it's not the whole genre of that kind of work. So yeah.
Yeah, I recently tried. So I had like a short brief on the project that I was working with, and I just tried to input it into ChatGPT and see like
Mm.
create 10 original quotation marks ideas, and I must say I was really impressed that, like, using all these creative techniques, like working in teams, having like this workshops, like using like your own experience and everything, something that ChatGPT did create in this list of 10 original ideas was really interesting and really made me like, choose another way of thinking. Like, oh, I thought this would be like, too basic. And
What was
it
it? Do you mind just so I got an example in my head? Like what was it, for example, it would come up with? Like
just
did you
like,
just
just like I would say, create an idea for, I don't know, what to implement into a brand to raise awareness about, like, I don't know, road safety. Like, what feature will you create for a product, for example,
yeah,
or
okay.
create a call to action tagline for
Okay.
this particular brand. This, it does this and that, and it does create like really basic average call to action. But sometimes when I look at it, I think it is really basic, but I didn't even think about it. So in a
Yeah.
way, it does really help to think a bit more, from the average point of view, which sometimes we do,
Mm,
like, no, we don't want to be average, we don't want to be basic, which is
mm.
really like, an interesting thing that I
But
noticed.
it's interesting how you describe it as well. It you almost described it as you becoming more creative, or it sparked something else. It
Yeah.
didn't give you maybe the exact solution, but it gave you some new pathways, and that you could argue is that inspiration. Then maybe it becomes way more of an inspiration tool, and because a nuance, I think, like which we should add into that. Like there's a few things going on there, which is like I think both there's a difference between making stuff and the quality of what you're making, right? Like
Yeah.
the quality needs to be a part of it. And again, where we need to when creating work and the reality of making work in like day to day is very nuanced. It's very detailed. It's very small things. It's meetings. It's like finesse, very detailed feedback, or like something you overhear, or like something that might be said in a meeting that is unsaid, but you kind of sense that it needs. how do you type that into ChatGPT? Do you know what, like,
Yeah.
so that's what I mean. It feels like we live in a world where we interact with each other and there's so much stuff going on. So I don't know how, until we get to a place where everything is digital, all of our interactions is digital, it starts reading our faces, expressions, feelings, like it starts doing all that. It it will be really hard for it to do all of it. Do you know what I mean? And that's why
Yeah.
it will always come down to, it might cut some jobs out, but there will become new jobs, like create some new ones. Do you know what I mean? We hadn't foreseen. The same with the internet. Like it's removed some jobs but create new ones. Like it's. I think it's the same thing that will happen here. And again, you didn't get the final result right. Like you
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
you feel like you probably still have to insert even more stuff and some more stuff and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
but
but I totally include it now in my creative process as a way of inspiration. So, like just trying and asking it like what it would come up with, and to see, yeah, this is what, like, the whole internet that was scraped, this is what comes out, and this is what might be important as well. I need to take it into consideration. So, yeah, for now, I'm just like, looking at it as a tool, as you mentioned, that sparks creativity.
exactly, and that's like, again, I could totally see that, and I should probably start doing it myself. But if I'm working on a project or starting a project, like that is like the things, like Google the latest news about it. Look at the top Google searches, like what are the images, like what kind of sayings or quotes have been done around it, like what are the music lyrics around it. Like there's all these tools to like kind of generate ideas around a topic and so on. Like and it's really interesting as you're using it as almost like a research tool. And yeah, it could probably become that, and probably maybe a little bit more, right?
Yeah, sure, sure. And you mentioned the creative process, and I'm what I'm really interested about is how does it look? How does the creative process look? Like how when you approach a project, when you approach a new challenge? Because for me, it's like I think it's the most interesting, like behind the scenes, how it all happens
Mm.
before this great idea comes into your mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, Obviously, my job is sliding like slowly over the years, and a little bit more and more management. But I'll answer it from a point of view of like creating yourself and like being a creative. And I think being creative is like uh, I see it a little bit like being a comedian, as in I don't think like amazing fun comedians, Ricky Gervais or whoever you prefer, is like, I don't think they just think about jokes from 9 to 5. I think they are quite alert all the time. It's like when they're away at wedding in Wales, or if they are at a family dinner, or if they are on the tube to work, they will. It's something that is always switched on and something they always think about, and that is something I have probably always done. Like not always, but like I see it as a part of my job. I'm always switched on. I'm always like uh, looking at human insights or problems or something that could be solved and so on. So um, my favorite tool is my phone, and if you are around me, you will probably see me furiously typing on my phone all the time, taking notes, because when I see something or something that sparks something, I'll write it down. Observations, insight, references, like inspiration, all over. It's all over, right? But besides that, as we briefly spoke about, like if you're starting a new project, I would always start with the obvious, like Google it. I would always lean into the news because I love the context of stuff. Like I think context of advertising or communication is really interesting, where it sits, the time of year, like the cultural tensions, all those things. So I think that's one of the most important things to also figure out first, like figure out when it's launching and the category it's in, like, and my favorite things are thinking really big about it, like what should it be for the future, like what kind of what does it should this brand stand for, like think about the audience, like what they need and want. So uh, that's really big thoughts, and then I think you research, right? Like obviously figure out as much as you can about. Sometimes it's the really odd small detail of something specific a brand does that can be blown out of proportions and should be the whole thing, like which is wonderful. And then I think it's just keep going at it, like when you're in your zone of coming up with ideas, you just keep going, even though you think you have it. Like and also trust the process, as in uh, it comes eventually. Like there's something about like I heard someone mention it's really interesting that you would usually say like I get an idea, like you it's given to you, like you don't just, you can also of course say you come up with an idea, but like it's very much it's interesting that you get it from somewhere and you not almost not in control, which I thought was a really interesting way of like framing it, as in trusting the process. It will come eventually if you do all the research, if you learn, if you think hard enough about it, if it's in the back of your mind enough, if you go through your life, the solution will come eventually. And then yeah, it's just hard work, like that, like I think if you keep pushing, like great stuff will come.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree on that. As you said, like getting an idea. Recently, I decided just, for analyzing like how the ideas come, I decided to, do a rewind of the idea. So I outlined like, my process on like mirror board, and just seen like how these ideas would come. And then I would see, okay, this is the idea that I chose that I'm going to present. And I tried, to do backwards just to see where it came from. And for me, it's so fascinating, like how the brain works in this case. Like, what inspired you? Like, what event? You, as you mentioned, like on the way to the museum, you were sitting with someone, like next to someone. You noticed something, and this sparked an idea. Then this, like this reference sparked it. And yeah, it's always like the process, and it will come eventually. Yeah, I
Mm.
totally agree on that. And
But it's
yeah,
interesting that you could even backtrack it, because some things I wouldn't be able to figure out, like where it originated from. Like that's also what I mean, like with the nuance of our brains and how we take
yeah,
it in, and sometimes like where does it come from? You know what I mean? But there is also an element. There was an old teacher of mine said, like once you get quite good at something, like you don't think about it. So, for example, when you just get your driving license, you think about everything you do, like when you press what kind of button and like the gears and like all this. It's very like you think about everything and how you get there. And once you become a great driver, sometimes you don't even think about it. You're just already at where you need to be. And of course, you can backtrack, like kind of what you did, and you shift the gear, but you don't think about any of that because your brain has just like come up with like it just does it automatically, and knows how to get there in one way or another. Which
that's
is also dangerous, by the way, obviously.
yes,
Like
yes,
going on autopilot, like, and you need to
yeah,
keep challenging yourself, because that is, I think we spoke about it earlier, but that's the ultimately like probably creativity is like doing things in a new way that you haven't seen before. So it's important to challenge yourself, I guess, as well to do that. That's why it's powerful to take another route to work or do things differently, or don't write your script on your laptop for a day. Do it on paper, and like all those things, like challenges. Those things can also be really interesting, like breaking it, like mixing it up.
yeah. I recently seen a really interesting TED talk on that. So basically, like most of our lives, we do all of the things on autopilot, and with creativity, it's really dangerous. Like because you use the same techniques, you use the same routes to come up with the idea, and then it's just you're not challenging yourself enough. And with that, I wanted to ask you a question regarding: do you ever get like speaking from my experience, I sometimes get frightened that there's like everything is already, been come up with. Like I feel sometimes that there's nothing more like cool or new to be created. Do you ever face this fear? For me, it's like I get this creative block straight away.
Yeah, I guess you also touched upon it earlier. Like, is everything a version of something, like to
Yeah.
some extent? Like, but that said, that's also why it's fantastic when new technology comes around and you can change it and create it in a new way. Like Avatar, the movie, wasn't that a remake of? I think I think some people have drawn the parallel to Pocahontas, just set in some weird space world. I mean, but it still felt like a new, fresh film. I think at the time, I can barely remember it, but I just mean, I think there's always a new way of doing it, and there's always new, exciting things to be found out there. But yeah, I know what you mean, but I wouldn't let it block you that you think everything is invented. There's always a new version of it, or a tweak to it that makes it feel surprising. So, and our world changes, all right? So again, the context, you can kind of play into that. We are luckily moving forward, and new things are happening that we haven't seen before. So if you play into that as well, there you already got a new, um, exciting springboard, right? So, yeah, I think it should be doable, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and what like I know it's a question that a lot of people ask, like giving advice to yourself, like when you were back, I don't know, in the start of your career. But I want to ask you as our last question to give an advice to like a young creative that is just entering the industry and they see like, oh my god, there's this AI happening and there's like everything is changing, a lot of new media formats are coming, like what should I do? What would you say to this young creative?
That's a good question. um I probably, like, what I don't feel has changed is, like, we still need great ideas no matter what kind of medium where it sits. Like, if it's a radio thing, or like a TV thing, or a social media thing, like, you still need to have great ideas. Like, and again, that comes down to, like, original thinking, fun insights and observations, and it's all that stuff. Embrace yourself in that world. Be a consumer of the world, and, like, observe what's going on, and, like, take it all in, and, like, try and do a creative spin on it. And I think I would just, and when it comes to technology, like, I think that's the foundation of all of it, which will never change. And I think when it comes to the future and technology, I think it's just way more like, embrace it, work with it, like, rather than trying to push against it, and just use it to your advantage, and like, see it as an opportunity and something fun, and, like, don't let it overwhelm you in any way. And just, again, I think you'll hopefully be way more that more people can access it, and you don't need, the same thing the phone did. Like, anyone can make a film now if you got a phone with a video thing. Like, but that doesn't mean, like, everyone is making films. Like, it still takes energy and effort, and, like, so, I mean, use the tools. Like, see it as there's no barriers to create your things, amazing art, and put it into the world, and you can put it on the internet where anyone can see it if it's good enough, and we'll celebrate it. So, I I think it's an exciting time. I wish I was starting out now. So,
Yeah, I totally agree, it is an exciting time. And yeah, thank you so much, Rasmus. And yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was really interesting to talk with you.
no, thank you. It was great to chat to you. Really fun, and yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe and share. Leave comments on any platform you use for listening to podcasts. Check out the links I will leave in the description below, and please email us with your stories and suggestions for the next topics. Have a great week.